the sadistic rhymes that you hear in this rap is not the reality of the world. The recordings of pieces of Malcolm X's speeches between rap rhymes does not meet what you need to know about what's going on in the world. They are designed to maintain you deaf, dumb, and blind to reality, and ultimately to set you up for death and damnation and rulership by other ethnic groups and other people. You may dip and bow your head to the rhythm of the music, but yet as soon as you dip and bow your head to the rhythm of the music, I can see you looking and looking to see if you can jump over this turnstile to avoid being caught by a white policeman. Because the reality is that while you're dipping and bowing to the sounds of the rap, the white nerds are staying in school, and the same white nerds will be the ones that will arrest you and put you in jail. And it's the same white nerds that you try to avoid at these turnstiles, and it's the same white nerds that sit in these courts and sentence you to 25 years in prison and sentence you to life in prison, and may one day even sentence you to death. You must wake up to the reality of things. And you must wake up to the fact that there is no group of people, white, black, Korean, Latino, Arab, or any other group that's going to hand you and you and you and you equality on a platter. You're going to have to fight for it. You're going to have to struggle for it. And you're going to have to realize that you have to defend your interests as a people and as a student. And that there are classes today, such as the white middle class, that struggles to maintain its prerogatives. Let me give you an idea, because some people make a big mystery out of education. Let me just read here why we are being miseducated and how we are being miseducated. This was a piece in the New York Times, the 18th of February, 1993. Teaching in a closet or a shower. Crowded classes and more students are a portent of the future. It is so crowded in some New York City public schools that some students get lunch at 10:30 a.m. Some attend classes in churches, empty warehouses, factories, even defunct department stores. Classes are taught in closets, and computer labs are converted shower stalls. And the problem is only getting worse. And they talk about the largest surge in enrollment in a quarter of a century in New York City schools. They indicate here that city public school enrollment peaked in 1971 with the record of 1,140,349 students, as the city entered a period of stark decline and retrenchment. What are we saying here? The number of students that are entering New York City schools is increasing at the very point when New York City schools are becoming poverty-stricken, when the New York City school budgets are what? Decreasing and shrinking. This is the school system that African American people have inherited. A school system that is becoming constricted and restricted in its financial possibilities. And yet at the very point that it is becoming constricted in its ability to finance our education, the number of students entering the system is increasing. Schools officials use the opportunity to close and dispose of outdated school buildings that they thought they would never need again. In other words, in the 70s, they thought that the decline in the population of New York City schools would continue. And so they closed some schools, they got rid of them because they thought they would never need them again. And now, lo and behold, what has happened? The population has increased and we have tremendous overcrowding. Much of the recent increase has been attributed to new immigrants who have been filling up public schools in some neighborhoods while seats in other neighborhoods go begging. Some of the growth is also because of the economic pressures on parents during a recession that has resulted in sagging enrollments in private and parochial schools. We are seeing a shrinkage in the population of parochial schools, that is Catholic schools and other private schools. While enrollment in our schools continues to grow dramatically, our share of the state's allocation for education continues to shrink. This was stated by Mr. Fernandez, the outgoing chancellor. In the last 3 years, more than 125,000 immigrant children enrolled in city schools. The largest group came from the Dominican Republic, followed by Jamaica, the former Soviet Union. We're going to come back to this immigrant issue, by the way. The former Soviet Union. In other words, as the Soviet Empire broke down, a lot of the people are leaving that empire, including Soviet Jews and other European white folk, and coming to America. And of course, are being enrolled in New York City schools. They're also coming from Guyana, China, and Haiti. They note that between 1971 and 1991, enrollment in private or parochial schools fell by more than a third to 267,838 from 415,939. So the educational situation here is going to be one of great struggle between groups for shrinking resources. The struggle has been taking place since the very beginning between white and black, with the whites, of course, manipulating the budgets and manipulating the nature of education of African people to maintain their power relations and their dominance over African people. A relationship that they do not intend to give up. Let's compare some of the spending per student in the New York City area between 1986 and 1987. Manhasset, which is out on Long Island, the spending per student per year amounts to $11,372. That is between 86 and 87. Now look at how that compares with New York City during that period, which spent $5,585. In other words, on Long Island, in places where white students are, the state spends more than twice as much money per student than in New York City. This is how ethnic groups, this is how class groups maintain their advantage and maintain their power. Let's look again. Jericho, Long Island. Again, $11,325 per student. Great Neck, $11,000. Again, compare that now to the $5,000 figure I mentioned in New York City. Bronxville, $10,000. Yonkers, Rye, New York, $9,000. Yonkers, $7,000 per student. Levittown, $6,000. Mount Vernon, $6,000. Roosevelt, $6,000. Down to New York City, $5,000. It's no accident then that people coming from these areas, going to these schools, have an advantage over people coming out of the New York City schools. And ladies and gentlemen, if you're not aware of these facts, if you're not struggling in terms of the state allocations for educational funds, if you're not aware of how money is allocated in the state for education, then you're going to be victimized by those allocations. And as you can see, the allocations are weighted to maintaining the status quo. Let's look then again at how this gap has widened. Let's bring it more up to date in terms of 1989 and 90. Manhasset, $15,000 per student. On Long Island again, Jericho, $14,000. Great Neck, $15,000. Now we're coming closer to home. Mount Vernon, $9,000. Roosevelt, $8,000. New York City, $7,000. So what are we indicating here then? That the ethnic and class struggle continues, and that ethnic and class struggle is such that those ethnic groups and those classes which can exercise political and economic power will bias the distribution of educational funds in such a way that their political and economic power is maintained. Now those are the basic average figures. Now you can go into particular areas such as Amagansett, Long Island, And you will recognize that there, the average amount of money spent per student in that area is something like